Hi readers, happy Wednesday. I hope that you are ready to learn and continue synthesizing as we look for new information from the pictures we looked at on Monday. On Monday, we started to look at something called apartheid, and we looked at 4 different pictures. One had a man behind bars, one showed violence, one showed peaceful protesting, and the last one showed a building with a caption of 100 people dead and over 1,000 injured. So we are going to look more into this time in history and look at those pictures with more detail to see how we can shape our thinking after gaining more information. So I think it should be important to describe this time in history. So I found something that gives you a little bit of a background piece as to why this time in history is important. So looking at this is an article from National Geographic and the History Channel, and it says racist fears and attitudes about natives colored white society. So this was in South Africa. So the natives were the people who belonged to South Africa and originated from there, and the white society came from outside, from Europe. Though apartheid was supposedly designed to allow different races to develop on their own, it forced Black South Africans into poverty and hopelessness. Grand apartheid laws focused on keeping Black people in their own designed homelands, and petty apartheid laws focused on daily life restricted almost every facet of Black life in South Africa. So this gives us a lot of background about this time in history. And there are 2 different types of apartheid laws. One is grand, which keeps the Black people in their own designed homelands. So they had a designated area where they had to live. And the other was petty apartheid laws, where it focused on the daily life and it restricted the lives of South Africans, specifically the native South Africans. So this gives us a little bit of a background into some of the events that were happening in this time, leading up to the pictures that we showed you last time. So let's check our next source to see if this helps us gain a better understanding about those pictures. Past laws and apartheid policies prohibited Black people from entering urban areas without immediately finding a job. It was illegal for a Black person not to carry a passbook. So they had to carry identification with them everywhere they went. It was illegal if they didn't. Black people could not marry white people. They could not set up businesses in white areas. Everywhere from hospitals to beaches was segregated, which means separated. So it was separated from the colored natives to the white society that had come to South Africa. Education was restricted. And throughout the 1950s, the NP passed law after law regulating the movement and lives of Black people. So the South African government was passing law after law after law that were regulating and restricting the lives of Black people in South Africa. So they weren't only affected as a small piece of any characteristic. Every part of their life was controlled. Who they could marry, if they could go to school, where they could get a job, where they could live. What they did day to day was controlled by these apartheid laws and the segregation that took place in South Africa. So to give you a piece about what a community looks like in South Africa and what they saw, this was a sign that was found in regions of South Africa. And it's a sign common in Johannesburg, South Africa, reading, "Caution, beware of natives." So they put "Caution, beware of natives" in reference to the natives of South Africa, which were the African Americans living in South Africa at the time. Well, what strikes me as why caution? Why caution? They're just people. They're people just like everybody else. Why be aware of the natives? What's wrong with them? Why are they afraid? What happened? That's what strikes me. And then these two people walk by so casually, like they're not even noticing that this sign says caution beware of natives. They're used to it. It's present in everyday society for them. So this really does affect the day-to-day lives of people. And this gives us a little bit of background about the segregation. The segregation began in 1948 after the National Party came to power. The Nationalist political party instituted policies of white supremacy, which empowered white South Africans who descended from both Dutch and British settlers in South Africa, while further disenfranchising Black Americans. So this National Party, when they came to power, they were fighting for more and more rights for white people who were descendants from the Dutch and British settlers, while still fighting to limit and limit and limit the rights and opportunities of the native people from South Africa. This is huge. This would make me so upset. How could they treat somebody like this? What makes somebody what makes them more deserving of these rights? I mean, it seems like things that we take for granted, that these people are having taken away from them. Let's find out a little bit more, because we looked at the protesting last time. Let's find out more about their protesting. Though they were disempowered, Black South Africans protested their treatment within apartheid. In the 1950s, the African National Congress, the country's oldest Black political party, initiated a mass mobilization against the racist laws, called the Defiance Campaign. Black workers boycotted white businesses, went on strike, and staged nonviolent protests. So this is a crowd at Johannesburg protest meeting, which defied a ban on such gatherings around 1952. So these people that were native to South Africans, the Black South Africans, decided, we're not going to do this anymore. We're protesting. We're fighting for our rights. We have equal opportunities. We should have equal opportunities. They demand freedom. They're looking to pass different laws. 300 years of white oppression. These people are fighting for change. They're fighting for a cause, a positive cause. They aren't just fighting the government to fight the government. They're fighting them for more rights and opportunities that should be given to them. So, when these protests occurred, let's see what happened in response. These acts of defiance were met with police and state brutality. Protesters were beaten and tried en masse in unfair legal proceedings. But though the campaigns took a toll on Black protesters, they didn't generate enough international pressure on the South African government to inspire reforms. In 1960, South African police killed 69 peaceful protesters in Sharpeville, sparking nationwide dissent and a wave of strikes. A subgroup of protesters who were tired of what they saw as ineffective nonviolent protests began to embrace armed resistance instead. Among them was Nelson Mandela, who helped organize a paramilitary subgroup of the ANC in 1960. He was arrested for treason in 1961 and was sentenced to life in prison for charges of sabotage in 1964. So Nelson Mandela helped organize a group that was fighting for change in a way that would be heard by the South African government. They realized that their peaceful protests were not working. They had strikes that were not working. So they began to embrace armed resistance instead. This man, Nelson Mandela, fought for years to have the rights for South Africans in South Africa, particularly the native South Africans. Let me show you a picture of Nelson Mandela, and I want you to see if you recognize him. This, the man from our first day, is Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was arrested due to his fighting for the rights of native South Africans with the use of force as they fought for the rights. They found that there was no other way for their voice to be heard except for active protests, and he was one of the many who were arrested due to their acts of protesting. He was in prison for over 2 decades as a result of him protesting. So this changes my initial thoughts about this picture. Initially, when I looked Monday, I thought he had committed a serious violent crime, that he was maybe a bad guy, he was dangerous, he maybe deserved to be there, but knowing what I know now, he was fighting for what was right. He was protesting what needed to be protested. He did not deserve to go to jail. He was fighting for the rights of people like him who were native South Africans and the future generations that were to follow. He was fighting to end segregation. Now I want us to take a look at the 2 other pictures with some more information. This one is the protesting picture that we saw on Monday. So, 30,000 protesters marched from Langa to Cape Town in South Africa to demand the release of prisoners in 1960. The prisoners were arrested for protesting against the segregationist past laws. So these people, when we thought about them on Monday, we realized that they were peacefully protesting for something. We just didn't know what. Now we know that they are protesting for the prisoners who were arrested for protesting against the laws that enabled segregation. So this makes me respect these people. They're fighting for a change. They're doing it peacefully. And they're helping people like Nelson Mandela who are behind bars due to the segregation and the protesting against the government. So in response to the 1960 protests, the government declared a state of emergency. This tactic cleared the way for even more apartheid laws to be put in place. Despite the state of emergency, Black groups continued to organize and protest, but a crackdown on many movement leaders forced them into exile abroad. So this deals with exile, which we were talking about before in the other picture, on Monday. Those people were removed, but the Black groups continued to organize and protest. They continued to fight for the rights that they believed they deserved. And despite the government's force for the state of emergency to end these organizations and protests, they kept fighting for what they believed in. Let's see an aftermath of one of the government emergencies and one of these protests. This picture is one that we looked at on Monday, but we didn't have all the information. We knew that over 100 people were killed and more than 1,000 were injured in South Africa following the anti-apartheid protests, but we didn't know the story behind it. If we look at the story, it says anti-apartheid protests continued as life for Black South Africans became more and more dire under apartheid. On June 16, 1976, up to 10,000 Black schoolchildren, inspired by new tenets of Black consciousness, marched to protest a new law that forced them to learn Afrikaans in school. In response, police massacred over 100 protesters, and chaos broke out. So the police massacred over 100 protesters. When I first looked at it, I thought it was people, like citizens, that were harming each other or something horrible, but it was the police that had massacred over the 100 protesters. Despite attempts to restrain the protest, they spread throughout South Africa. In response, exiled movement leaders recruited more and more people to resist. So after looking at these articles, it brings a whole new light to this time in history for me. I realized that these people who were protesting in the pictures we saw, in this picture that we saw on Monday, and this picture we were introduced to today, they are demanding something larger than themselves. They are demanding rights for the native South Africans and for apartheid laws to be discontinued, for segregation to stop, for them to have the rights of the white individuals living in South Africa as well. As we look more and more into synthesizing information, I hope that your mindset on things change and grow and develop as we look at more resources and become better readers.